Welcome to today's episode of MarTech Unraveled. Today we talk about personalization, and we are joined by an expert in this topic all the way from Denmark. Our guest today is Rasmus Houlind, a keynote speaker and author of several acclaimed books, including Hello FirstName, Profiting from Personalization. He is also the Chief Executive Officer at Agillic, an omnichannel marketing automation platform based in Denmark. Now, I met Rasmus at this year's MarTech World Forum in London. And when I heard him speak on this topic, I knew he definitely needed to be on this podcast. So welcome, Rasmus, to this podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. Small correction there. I'm actually the Chief Experience Officer. So I have other people to do the dirty work, and I get to do all the fun work.
Awesome.
So that's my official title. We call it CXO, but it shouldn't matter much. It just means that I have more time to delve on the subject matter of personalization. Actually.
Awesome. Cool. So let's dive right into today's topic. Let's start way from the beginning. How do you define personalization?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it was actually one of the reasons that drove me into writing a book about it. Because I found that colleagues and clients and consultants and everybody was sort of using the name in vain or using the term in vain. So, but really, they quite often meant different things, or they had different perceptions of what it was. So, if you ask in a big room if people know what personalization is, then normally everybody says yes. But when you then ask them what it is, then they tend to come up with different answers. So at first we thought that what the world needed was a definition of it, and actually in the book there is a definition. And I also met some postdocs from University of Lugano in Switzerland. They were doing like a big thesis, a postdoc on personalization within fashion, and they had like a definition that was like, I don't know, a really big paragraph. And the problem is that almost any marketing that you do today is slightly personalized, at least. So, of course, you can get something that's super personalized, that is completely for you. So, I mean, your electricity bill, for instance, it's not marketing, but it's super personalized. Or you can get something, or you can be like excluded from an audience where you don't get shown any ads or where you don't receive any emails. That's also personalization you'd never notice, of course. So even though the definition is something about matching the content that you have up with the customer insights that you have, and that if you have that in prose, it can be quite long. So like inferred and explicitly stated preferences, trying to match that up with the content that fits. That's sort of the definition of it. But in real life, it doesn't help you much, because so now we're at this definition which says that nearly every and all kinds of marketing is somehow personalization. It doesn't help me as a practitioner, really. So I don't know if it answers your question. It sort of did, but
yeah, yes, it did. I think the key thing that came out of there is I think personalization has a couple of different definitions depending on who is, from which standpoint you're thinking about it, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it sounds like it has to do with making something more personal, individual, or tailored to the individual.
Yeah, to some extent. And I think we spend a lot of time also because really with the book, there was like a big research process where we were, of course, like doing a lot of interviews, me and my co-authors. I have 3 co-authors from the book. And 2 of them are from other Nordic countries, like from Sweden and Norway. And we did like expert panels in the respective capitals, where we had sort of the local marketing experts in the room, and we were discussing these terms. And we really realized that there were like at least 3 different ways that the marketers are looking at personalization. And so either if you're working within within paid advertising and you're doing campaigns, you would, you would get a paycheck for working with personalized advertising. So you would have this opinion or this experience or this perception that you were working with personalization. And as long as you get paid for that, I think it's a really hard time saying that maybe just because other people have different perceptions of personalization, that doesn't make the personalized advertising thing wrong or make it any less personalization. So it can be slightly personalized, it can be super personalized. It's still personalization. So the campaigns is one thing, and when you move that over into owned media, like with newsletters and email marketing and email campaigns, that's also a discipline, so to speak, that works with personalization, and you can do it very lightly there. I mean, you can just like personalize the first name, and then that's an act of personalization, even though it doesn't necessarily become personal. So that's actually a distinction there worth making. Personalization is the process. Making something personal, I mean, it's a bit like making it relevant. Really, the only one to judge on that would be the consumer.
Mm.
So the campaigns, that's like a second, or that's like the first way of working with personalization, whether it's being on owned or paid media. And then you have your marketing automation, which is where you're triggering something that has to do with the customer lifecycle. So you have some behavioral data, you have some signals, or you have maybe the absence of signals that you would expect to see, like people not turning up at the gym even though they have a membership, or not putting in that third order with your online grocery store, for instance, that you would expect. So it could also be the absence of data. So triggering communications based on moments of truth and where in the customer life cycle do you believe a consumer to be, and what's going on most likely in their life right now that you have some kind of insight into. So that's the second one. A third one would be obviously on inbound platforms. So you come to you're looking at your website, said that you are like a webmaster or e-commerce manager or web manager or a head of digital. Then you're probably overseeing your inbound digital channels, such as the app and the websites. And that can also be sort of your set-off point. Say, wow, I have the responsibility for these inbound media. How do I then leverage personalization to, I don't know, do more conversions or get more loyalty? So that's sort of the third discipline in this. So campaigns,
Yep.
marketing automation, inbound platforms.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Before we get into those three components, I'd love to, again, let's start from, a wide, broad spectrum. Why should brands even care about personalization? Before we get into the technicalities, the different areas of marketing that it does apply, why should brands really care about it?
Yeah, they should care about it because consumers care about it. Quoting a McKinsey study from, it's called Next in Personalization. It's actually a few years old. So I think I'm quoting it in the book also. I think it's from 2021. So basically just after COVID had like finally been taken away. It says that 76% of consumers are more likely to buy from a brand that does personalization. And 78% is more likely to buy again, and 70-something percent, I don't recall the exact figure, is more likely to recommend that brand if they're using personalization. So I think it comes down to the fact that we as consumers want to be recognized, we want to be rewarded, we want our interaction history to be acknowledged. We don't want to start from scratch when we're interacting with the brand. We can even become annoyed, or worse, we can become like really angry if we are experiencing that we have to repeat ourselves and give up data again and again just because we're changing channels or we're just not being recognized, or because the brand is not using data to make it more convenient for us, or why are you not recommending me this and this and that. So it's actually coming to a point where people are not only expecting personalization, they're actually also becoming a bit angry if they see an obvious missed opportunity for personalized communication. So that's the real idea behind it. Also, some of the, certain industries are obviously a better fit for this than others because you need a lot of data or a lot of data point, or the potential for a lot of data points at least, in order to fuel the insights that you'd use for personalization. So if you're in FMCG, that it can actually be tricky to get consumer data, whereas sort of like a digital direct to consumer brands tend to have more data points and thus better options for personalizing.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I think one of the things I picked up from there is I think as consumers are being asked for more and more data, asking for data consumers giving up their data, is a huge thing. And so they expect something back in return,
Yeah,
a value
exactly.
exchange.
Realizing that I'm giving up value here, and if you don't use it, you're breaking our emotional consent, actually.
Yep, absolutely. So then why are brands either reluctant or slow to implement personalization, especially, those brands that are able to collect and are collecting a lot of data? What's
Yeah.
the barrier?
So, I mean, obviously the barrier could be not having data. That's one. The other one could be not having data in a format that you could actually use it, or if it's clean, or if it's messy, or is coming from loads of different systems. Say that you are like an international telco and you bought up all kinds of different systems and you have different platforms in different countries and for different products. So the integration needed to make that happen and to be able to have sort of a single customer view or single customer views or a golden customer profile can be a lot of work. So that's definitely one barrier. But I do see, I mean, a lot has happened within data management and with the advent of customer data platforms and such. It's become more and more easy to get got sort of good control of your data. It's much better than it's ever been, I believe. So that could be one barrier. Could also be that it's not the strategy that you want. I mean, there are other ways that you can make money. So I mean, if you can import super cheaply made stuff from low wage countries, and you can put that on a trailer and you can sell it at cheap prices. So I mean, having a really efficient supply chain with really cheap suppliers, that's also a business strategy that many are really good to using very well to make money. On the other hand, if you want to charge some kind of premium, or if your product is a bit complex, then I see more and more often that personalization does become one of the best cost benefit ratio strategies that you can deploy. So within loyalty programs, for instance, just having the loyalty program will feed you data. But if you don't use the data and the insights for doing any personalization, you're not activating your members, and they're not using the benefits that they're earning, and thus they're not thinking any way different around you. So you need to activate them with personalized communications in order to get the emotional loyalty, really.
That's really interesting. So it's sometimes the technology that's a barrier, trying to get it all together in order to make sense of the data. But it sounds like also personalization is a customer experience thing.
Yeah.
The better experience you give your consumers, the more they are willing to buy more from you, recommend from you, and so on. So it's not a double-edged sword, but I think, it has benefits on both sides. Happy customers means better bottom line.
Totally, yeah. And actually, the third and maybe a bit sort of new barrier to make this happen is a topic that I'm talking a lot about these days, and I refer to it as the content crisis, because really, as you also saw at the Martech World Forum in London,
Mhm.
the the main model that I have in the book Hello First Name is called the bow tie of personalization, and it's equal data and insights, and it's equal content, and that those are sort of the two things that you tie together in a beautiful bow or a bow tie. I use the bow tie metaphor a lot because every gentleman knows that it's super tricky to tie a bow tie if you need to do that on your own. So that kind of makes it a bit fun, at least for the male part of the audience, but probably also for the female ones that have seen their spouse, sweating and really trying to wrap his head around how was it that you tie this bow tie because it was a year ago.
Mm.
But yeah, so just saying that content is equally as important as the insights part is. Obviously, the insights are derived from customer data, but what about the content? I mean, if you don't have any content, there isn't any personalization really. So I mean, the same goes for insights. If you don't have any insights, there isn't any personalization going on. But people have been so occupied, or brands have been so occupied with sort of tackling the data layer and the data problems and getting those insights. And when they're sort of finally ready to activate them, then they sometimes realize, hey, we don't have the content, we don't have anything to say, or we're not saying it in a fun way or in an engaging way, or we don't have enough content variants for the different segments or for even the individuals that we're talking to. So content then suddenly becomes an equally big problem. And that's why we're talking, Franz Riemers, my co-author, and I were talking a lot about the content layer these days. So everybody's familiar with the data layer, but not so many are familiar with the content layer. And for those who are maybe watching this, I'll just show it here. So that's kind of the idea, that you have the data layer, like with data collection, master data modeling, and finally activation. And then you actually have a parallel in the content layer, which is like a fairly novel topic, where you collect the content and you have it in your master content databases and your asset management systems. Then you're modeling it into like sort of localized static content, and then that's then finally activated on, for instance, your inbound platforms. That actually goes on in parallel, but you may not realize the importance of it until you've mastered the data layer. And then actually those two meet up in the personalization layer, where you can, of course, like match your insights with your content in terms of conversion rate optimization and so on. But if you can then actually scale the decisions on a one-to-one level or at a segment level, that's where real personalization starts to happen. That can then be like fed back into the inbound platforms, but also orchestrated out through outbound owned media. What we see now is an image that is where the data layer for many companies is quite well sort of integrated, and there's loads of technologies that can help you do that, and it's quite automated. This is not the case for the content layer, but we do see that probably Gen AI will play a role similar to that of the machine learning and predictive analytics playing for the data layer. We'll see Gen AI playing like a similar role for the content layer, and obviously merging that eventually into the personalization layer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because I guess with the content crisis, what you're getting at is, if you are personalizing, then you definitely need different variations of content to serve the different segments. But sometimes creating that content at scale or in the number of variations that match your different data layers or segments can be the barrier for brands.
Totally. And for some companies, it's a matter of creating that content. Some brands already have loads of content, and it's more a matter of actually maybe repurposing that content or modifying it, or funneling it, or making sure that the process is clear about, so what is our core brand story, what is our corporate visual identity. So really starting from the what you would put into what Franz and I call the brand LLM. So imagine you have a large language model that has been trained on the ideas of the founder and your values and your value proposition and who do you want to be for whom and so on. And from that, you should be able to derive, using Gen AI, all the sort of core assets that you'd be using for your website, for company presentations, and for all kinds of master content that you'd be using time and time again. Ultimately, then taking that into a localization perspective, choosing what to show on which channels, and putting it out into print material, even, any kind of channel that is published, so to speak. And then from there on, and this is the distinction between brand-led, which is normally not personalized, but you still have it localized in order to, you'd probably market a certain product range differently in the Middle East as you would in the Nordics, for instance. So even though it's probably the same product, the imagery you'd use, the people that you'd show there, and like the background images and so on, is something that you probably take a localized approach to. And then the next level is obviously taking that into the personalized content, which is probably for the segments at first, but eventually I think we'll see also individualized content being created with the help of Gen AI. I have some examples of that on text. Still, it's kind of dodgy for images and for moving images as in video yet. But yeah, it is happening, and I just think this development is extremely interesting to follow.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of businesses who are listening to this and thinking, okay, this sounds great. Like, we really need to get onto this and figure out how can we better serve better experiences for our customers. What would be your advice in terms of where to start? If a business is thinking, okay, I really want to streamline my processes to start personalizing better, where would you recommend a brand to start?
That's a good question. I think basically you need to set some processes in motion in parallel. So if you already know that your data is a mess and you have like a disparate, unintegrated data sources, then that is something that you are going to have to tackle. So that is one part. That is namely the data layer, getting that in order. Assuming that's already sort of in place, then I would make sure that I have the messages to match. So that I have my content layer in place, and that I at least, I mean, maybe not super integrated at first. You don't need to start there, but at least make up your mind and do some investigations into your customer lifecycle. And I mean, maybe use an agency to help do that, or use some consultants to really map out the full customer journey, and do some analysis on where is it that you are currently losing the most money. I mean, are you struggling to get enough traffic or visitors or members? Are you struggling to make those get the first purchase? Are you struggling to make them do the third purchase? Are struggling to get them engaged in your so say that you have subscription based uh, offering? Are you struggling to keep them engaged in consuming your media services, or going to the gym regularly, or whatever your subscription is about? Do you have problems there, or are you seeing people sort of drop off towards the end of a customer life cycle, have retention problems and so on? And really trying to investigate that with big curiosity, trying to find out what are sort of the most important moments of truth in the customer journey, not only for the company, because that's always about money, but also from a customer point of view, because quite often the customer oriented moments of truth, or the moments of truth, like from the POV of the customer, comes before that of the actual cancellation. So whereas a company, I might be looking into, oh, so we're getting all these like cancellations of our subscriptions, and that's a moment of truth for the company. But quite often the moment of truth happens before that, like within the customer's mind, when he or she is sort of realizing, I'm not using this service really. I am not probably going to come back to the gym because I'm not that type. Or if I'm watching Netflix all the time, I might be sort of slowly making up my mind that I don't need the HBO, or vice versa. So
Mm.
so so really trying to figure out which kind of moment of truth is it that we need to win the customer over in.
Yeah.
And say that you find, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 of those throughout the customer life cycle. That's where you need to focus. So if this is like a must-win battle, but it's like a micro battle, and it takes place at individual times for individual customers, making sure that you have the data and the insights to provide the insights for knowing which customers are now currently in that moment of truth, and then make sure that you have the content to match. So which kind of emotional content do we need to have in place to make these people change their minds? And obviously, I mean, having like product recommendations or show recommendations, or all these like ribbons that you see on, for instance, the streaming services, or product feeds in emails and so on. Those are nice and those are really good. But I've yet to see anyone become sort of like really emotionally uh,
Mhm.
kicked on about any product feed ever. So really, the message is what you need to. This is where you need to address people's emotions. You need to sort of catch them in the moment, and address the fact: yes, we see you, we hear you, we respect you, we value your history with us, and we treat you with that in mind, and we show that to you. So really showing that as like a sign of appreciation.
Mm.
So yeah, figuring out which moments of truth to focus on, and make sure you have the right insights and the right content to actually win over those moments.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought up the customer journey mapping, because that really helps you to see, the
Totally.
full end-to-end story of your customer's interaction with your brand, and then you're able to now see, okay, points of disinterest, or friction, or
Yeah.
and so on. So yeah, that's a really
And it
good
can be
point.
both qualitative and quantitative. I mean, quite often you probably start like qualitatively. Let's get everybody in the same room and see how do the different departments maybe sort of perceive the customer journey and what are the different ways that it could take. Then maybe following up with quantitative studies on, okay, so how many people are actually in here? We may have a feeling that this is a big problem for us, but let's put some numbers to it and see, okay, how much money are we losing here, or which potential are we losing out on here? And really trying to make the business case behind them. Because in those very moments, see if you can pull in all, I call them corners of the bow tie. So you have like your customer segments ready, and you know which segments are where and how big they are and what's on their mind and so on. You build your personas to sort of resemble those. Could be value-based segments as well, as in recency, frequency, monetary value, I mean RFM segments, or like propensity scoring of the high-value customers or low-value customers, high-potential customers.
Yeah.
What could be the moments of truth? So what's going on, like based on behavioral data, what's going on right now in real time? Who's shopping for a bikini, even though it's February and they're on the northern hemisphere, or who has an like subscription that's expiring, or who forgot to renew their credit card? Those kinds of like behavioral things, matching those insights up with the content, which would be your content feeds, so your like your product feeds or your article feeds or your whatever content feeds that you have. Could be user generated content, could be like Trustpilot reviews and whatnot. And ultimately your messages, which is like the final corner of the bow tie that we're now finally able to make scale using Gen AI. So for the most important moments of truth, make sure you consider all four corners of the bow tie there.
Yeah. So this definitely requires, a good chunk of time thinking through strategically, the different segments, moments of truth, and mapping all of those before jumping
and you
in.
need to agree on it. And you need to agree on it internally. So if unless you're using the same words for the same things, then this discussion can go on forever. Which is really why I think that's how my authorship came to be, because I was so frustrated with people who sort of seemingly agreed on terms, but really when you scratch the surface, they didn't. So really starting out with like looking at some models and having sort of a set agreement on, okay, so what do we call what here? So what is a segment? What is a moment of truth? What is a message? What is a content feed? Make sure that everybody's aligned on that, or you'll continuously misunderstand each other for a long time. So get people in the same room, do the collaboration, because you cannot do this alone. Probably also need to employ agencies, and you'll have different tech providers, which with each of theirs own sort of sets of what do we call things here. So any kind of system that you buy, any piece of technology, will have like their own nomenclature for whatever they call things. And so if you don't have your own definition of what is what, it can be really hard to then start deploying systems where things are called something else, really, which just adds to the confusion.
That's a really good point. So when you talk about agreeing on the, as you said, the nomenclature, is it within the marketing team that you decide upon it, marketing and sales team maybe? And then do you also share that with your agency partners and your tech partners, or do you figure out how do we map the vendor terms or the agency terms to our terms?
So I would definitely do it internally. That's for sure. Sales, marketing, and CRM teams should definitely align on this. And I would pick like a book where someone had already done the dirty work, because it can be hard to agree on something internally, because then then you're using my terms, suddenly it becomes like a political play. Whereas taking a literature from within the field and going with that, and my Hello FirstName is not the only book that does this. There are other books as well. But taking that off the shelf, say, okay, so this author has done all this research, and these are the words that we're going with, period. And then I would make my agency adopt that as well, in order to make sure that they deliver in the same terms as we do. I don't think it's possible though to get the tech companies to change their systems and change the wordings, because that's pretty heavy. So that's probably now you can inform your customer success managers and so on what you're calling things, and that's fine. But don't expect the tech to change the names on the buttons and so on.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Maybe I'll just take you a couple of questions back. Talking about the data side, and certain businesses that have the luxury of collecting data and others that don't. We talked about the FMCG brands and how they struggle with being able to collect data and know their customers. I wonder if you have any case studies or of how FMCG brands have been able to overcome this or are overcoming this.
So yeah, so I mean, you could go two ways. Either the struggle, or let's just dwell on the problem for a while, is that a lot of personalization is sort of traditionally built on transactional data. And as a FMCG or a CPG company, you probably don't own the transaction because you're selling through resellers. So, I mean, you can obviously do like personalized communications to your resellers, which is also a way that you could go. So you can sort of use their data on how they are buying the different products and what they could and should be selling more and so on. So that's definitely sort of a B2B play for personalization there. But if you want to, and a lot of these people would then be doing like branded advertising towards the consumers, but selling to resellers. So B2B2C.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but the consumer will ultimately not really experience any personalization. So what you can do is that you can start to sell direct, and this is probably what Nespresso did. So I mean, you can buy your capsules directly from Nespresso, and they have like their owned and operated stores where you can go there, and it's like a fine coffee experience to go there. It's kind of an experience. They were very very famous when they came out with that in sort of the onset of Omnichannel. And they're still doing it. So that's one way. So they can collect like really detailed ideas for which coffee tastes that I like, and they can do a lot of storytelling around that, and they can sell me the capsules that match. So going directly D2C is one way of doing that, because then they own the transaction, and they're actually also doing like taste tests. So and that's a I mean, it's collecting zero-party data. And I think any FMCG company could do that. So not necessarily owning the transaction, but collecting data through like surveys and quizzes and gamifications and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So remember it's zero-party data, so you probably need to re-engage and engage customers time and time again in order to keep this data fresh. But it is a way where you can start to figure out what's on the mind of the consumers, and you can start personalizing towards that goal. So I mean, there could be different reasons for drinking coffee, perhaps. So if maybe you want to figure out, okay, so which kind of coffee drinker are you? And while people are taking these quizzes and tests, they're doing it for the fun of it. They're also spending time with the brand. Then Nespresso will get a lot of insight, even though they may not have a single transaction, and they can start to personalize communications towards the customers. And they can even use that to leverage into branded campaigns. So suddenly they start to know a lot about which customers, even though they have like a huge part of their sale which is not direct but is through resellers.
Mm-hmm.
The small part of the sales that does go direct will give them some insights that they can then use when they're targeting their advertising, even though that's on more branded assets, so they know which message to put in front of which segments or which audience on paid media. So that's another way that you can go about it.
Yeah,
So
I love
that's a
that.
few ways, at least, that FMCG brands can go with this.
Yeah, that's a really good example of Nespresso. Really, really good example. And you touched on, different types of data. I think you talked about zero-party data.
Yeah.
Of course, there's first party and third party. Maybe we can touch a little bit on that, just because we talk about personalization and how brands can leverage or start to personalize. Maybe you can talk to us about, what sort of data should brands be collecting? Is it zero party, first party, and so on?
All of the above.
Okay.
uh,
Uh-huh.
I think it depends on which industry you're in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the most obvious answer is to start collecting transactional data. That's where, I mean, that's the whole reason for doing loyalty programs. The original reasons for doing loyalty programs, it was to like give a small incentive to the consumer, so they would let the retailer know that this is not just an anonymous purchase. This is actually me, Rasmus, who is buying this, I don't know, sun lotion or whatever. And then over time, the retailer would get insights into the customer database, not only at like a generic SKU level, stock keeping unit or category level, but also on a customer level. So which customers tend to buy the same things, and which customers should we then reward or give the benefits of buying into extra categories, or which kind of vouchers would drive more repeat purchases from customer X as opposed to customer Y. So transactional data, that's obviously one thing. There can be sort of the FMCG problem with that, that you may not own the transaction point at all, or there can be uh, the uh, the risk that or you can just, for the sake of getting more data, you could get into collecting zero party data. So that would be asking people, I mean, who they are and what their preferences are and so on. And that's a good way of. I mean, you can use that, for instance, if you're launching a loyalty program, you don't know a lot about your customers. It will take a lot of time in order for you to build up enough insights through transactional data. And you can use this to get a lot of insights much faster, which is really nice. So I'll definitely do that. Third-party data is more coming from, like, could be the weather report or statistically based segments based on household data and like income in certain areas of the countries and so on. So that could be like third-party data that you could be leveraging, or simply the news coming in, whatever news relates to certain segments more than others. So that's something for third-party data sources. Second-party data sources isn't used that much. It's mainly used in coalition loyalty programs. So if you have like really big coalition loyalty programs where you're actually having collaborationships between brands where you can share points and insights together. So like mostly first-party data and transactions, zero-party data in the form of gamification, and third-party data from like whatever data source that you can have. B2B, there's a lot of third-party data that you can source there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's super helpful. That's very helpful. Now,
I forgot one thing actually. I see some are actually building data collection into their products themselves. So I think one of the first company to do that was probably Amazon with Kindle. So I mean, they're basically digitizing the book. So now they can certainly see not only which books you buy, but also how far you get in reading them, and how and is this a page turner? Are you past the point of no return, and so on. So a lot of insights coming from a consumer product. But also the way that Nike, like it's many years ago, was some of the first to put a chip into your running shoes to find out how are you actually using the product. So coming closer to that, and we see that also in B2B, where people are building sensors into. I mean, obviously Tesla is basically like a supercomputer on wheels. But you also have chips built into windmills, for instance. I mean, letting the manufacturer know when spare parts needs to be changed and so on. So like Internet of Things kind of is also a source for collecting data.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. We could go on for a very long time about this topic. It's very, very vast and very, very interesting. As we close, I'd love for you to, tell us a bit more about your book, Hello FirstName, and your amazing podcast. And also, what was the inspiration for you to write about this topic and really go deep on personalization?
Yeah. So the book Hello FirstName, I mean, you can buy it on Amazon or whatever bookstore that features it. I think if you Google Hello FirstName and remember to put a $ in front of first name, then you should be able to find it. We can also make it possible for people to maybe download the audiobook if we put like a link to that in the show notes. So that's definitely possible. It came out last year, and it's been a tremendous success, I must say. So I really felt I caught a wave there. What drove me to sort of initiate the process and to take on co-authors to help me solve it was this confusion around the term personalization. I was frustrated with people being frustrated about not being able to have nuanced and unambiguous conversations about what personalization is and was. And that led to like confusion. It led to disappointment. It led to wasted budgets. It transformed into like projects going south, broken promises towards management groups and so on. So really wanting to try and sort of rewire that was the main reason for writing Hello FirstName. And that is so much fun because we did the models for that. We had sort of an initial idea of how would this look because we wanted the practitioners' models for how to work with this, and that was the bow tie of personalization that I explained earlier. So really matching the insights together with the content. When you really boil personalization down, that's what you come up with. And really putting those models in there and allowing for everybody to use those models. And I can link to all the models. I think one of the best things about a business book, if you can use it without necessarily having to read it. So if there are some models in there, like visual models that make a topic more comprehensible or more understandable, and makes it easier to have these unambiguous conversations about it with your colleagues or with your agency or with everybody who's sort of trying to work together on this, that will be really, really helpful. So the models are, I see they are traveling all over the world, and they're much faster at traveling than the book is actually. The model is, I mean, I go to a conference, the slides are shared, and then suddenly these models are popping up in agency and client presentations all over the globe, and that's really all the fun, and nothing could make me more proud or more happy than that. And then occasionally I hear from someone like on the other side of the world who says, "Wow, I came across this, and I'm using this, and just want to let you know that has had like tremendous effect for how we're working together on this topic." So that's I didn't anticipate that, but obviously that's a thing that makes an author very, very happy. So please, everybody who listens to this, please make use of the models. You don't need to buy the book. You can listen to the book actually if you go to Spotify or Apple Podcast. I narrated it, so that's like a full audiobook that people can listen to it. So it's not gonna make anyone rich writing a book like this, but it's still a helpful tool.
Absolutely. I agree. I really, really loved the way you just made this whole concept of personalization very, very practical. And as I said, when I saw you present in London, for me, I was like, this really has brought it to life. And I can see it, actually being actualized in a business, because it's been broken down into very understandable bites. And as you said, the models also help really to bring the discussion around the table so that we can actually implement this within our teams. So definitely we will link all your resources on our podcast. And I really want to appreciate you for coming on to Martech Unraveled. And
my pleasure.
And hopefully I'm sure we can get you on again for a version 2.0.
Yeah. I'm totally up for that. I'm available that day.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rasmus.